All right, folks, welcome back. This is Wealth Curated Full Auto Podcast Edition. I don't know how many, but I do know that Sir Hugo is here for the third time. Hugo Eccles of Design Royalty.
Keep,
Hugo, which we're right on the heels of the Queen
mm,
biker. No disrespect. Long live the Queen, and now long live the King, I guess. But
yeah.
the Queen biker, as it were. I followed. I'm not a royal watcher, but I'm always interested in history. I'm a history guy, and I watched a lot of the proceedings. And early on, they showed, of course, and are still showing a lot of photographs from her life. And
Mm.
there, early on, I saw the Queen with motorcycles, fixing them, riding them. Have you seen those photos?
Um,
Back in the war
I
days,
haven't.
I guess.
I haven't seen the one with the photo. I know she was part of. She joined like ancillary force during. She was quite
Right,
young, like 18 or something during World
right,
War II.
right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Queen, or was, I suppose, if we now have to say. Um, I wouldn't say I was a royalist. I would say I was a queenist. I would say something
Yeah,
like that. But she's been around. She's been queen for like 70 years.
yeah.
She's seen a lot. I read something somewhere where she's been monarch for almost a third of the history of the United States,
It's amazing, right? So 70
which
years,
is,
longest reigning monarch, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah, longer than Queen Victoria. And yeah, obviously very capable. I think, what was really admirable during the Second World War was like her her father, the king, decided not to evacuate his family from London, so they all stayed in London while with everyone else while everyone was getting bombed. So anyway, yeah, sad day.
Yeah,
I got up early on Monday morning,
yeah.
2:30 in the morning to watch
Wow.
it live because I
Yeah,
thought, you know,
yeah. I was
I
going
was
to, but I was up till about 2:30. So
right.
it was going to be on at 5 hour time. And
Yeah.
I'd watched the very first service from Scotland,
Mm,
which was riveting, I thought, on a lot of levels. But long live the Queen biker. It was fun
yeah.
seeing those photos with her around
Yeah.
the motorcycles and on the
Yeah. She was a cool
motorcycle.
lady.
Yeah, full life for sure. So, what's been going on in your world? Last time we chatted, you were sort of doing some top secret stuff you wanted to talk about, couldn't
Was
talk
I?
about, didn't talk about, happily talked about. You were up in Canada, one of those big EV bike makers, or one of those
Ah,
new
yes,
EV bike makers.
we're still talking up there.
Okay.
Um, yes, I was trying to remember last time we spoke and what may have happened since then. It's been a
Yeah.
while, hasn't it?
Well, I know you won yet another design award, right?
Yes.
I commented you're going to need a bigger trophy case pretty soon. Like you and Roger Federer, nowhere to put all the trophies.
Yeah, I mean, they keep handing them out and I keep accepting them. So it's no, it's very it's quite humbling, really. I think we're up to 17, I think, something like that, which is
Wow.
pretty cool for the XP.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so the plan is to make some more XPs,
Is
which
it?
I think we may have, yeah, yeah, we're actually gonna we've got a evolved design, sort of
Okay.
race inspired version.
Oh,
And
wow.
we have a technical partner who makes a thing called a coil driver, which is sort of like it's a bit like a sort of virtual gearbox for an electric motor. And the kind of pragmatic outcome of that is it's much more efficient. You get much more range.
Okay. That's good.
The sexy outcome of that is you
Yeah.
get something like 20% more power, which is
Wow.
crazy.
More power, more
Uh,
range. That's what we need.
yeah. So the plan is to build a race bike, and then I think we're planning on filming it at Laguna Seca. Got a very cool female stunt woman
Cool.
set up to do the riding and stuff like that. And then we want to do like a limited edition of them as well. So we're just working
Okay.
out
So
to the
do you have an idea of the numbers? How many you're going to do?
somewhere in the 20s, I think. Sort of 20 to 25. Not a huge number, but
Yeah.
and probably sort of carbon fiber bodywork and all numbered and stuff like that. And then there's going to be a certain amount. I think there'll be a certain amount of sort of modification allowed
That's
for
super
each
exciting.
customer. Yeah, really cool. And then
What's the time horizon on that?
that is an excellent question. I don't
That's
think
why I'm
this.
here.
Yeah,
That's
I
why
don't
they
think
pay
this.
me the big bucks.
Yeah, I don't think this year. I don't think this year. I think probably
Okay.
Q1 2023. Just
Well,
because we've got to source all the bikes, do all the molds,
yep.
assemble them all, test them, etc., etc. But yeah, I think we'll start offering them in hopefully Q1
Wow,
next
very
year. Would
nice.
be
Very
cool.
nice.
And then I think I told you we've been working with Livewire.
Yes.
I did.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Excellent. Yeah.
We didn't go deep into it though. You mentioned that you had been working on some things. So what's going
Yeah.
on here?
Well, we're sort of deep in that. A lot of CAD, which isn't my favorite thing, but also sort of computer CAD augmented with cardboard CAD, cardboard aided design. So sort of cardboard mock-ups, and then
Okay.
they're a good kind of sanity check just to make sure that the CAD is kind of representing reality. Because actually, often when you're building stuff on the screen, it looks very different than
Yeah.
when you go see it in person. So it's good to kind of go back and forth and have a bit of that dialogue.
Yeah. So
But
let me hit a
yeah,
pause button there. So I had not thought about, I mentioned this to you recently. I had not thought about Harley in years, right? I grew
mm,
up around Harleys and had them, rode them, et cetera, for years and years, and then went away as a dad and a single dad from riding altogether for a lot of years, and came back to it several years ago when I was living out in LA, in your neck of the woods,
mm,
Orange County corridor, and always loved the Triumphs and sort of the old school cafe racers, but got introduced to the sport bikes out there and just fell in love and have never gone back. All that to say, uh, Harley has, of course, been off of a lot of people's radar for some time. I think the
mm.
Live Wire was an attempt to try and be relevant before anyone else, and I'm not sure they did everything right, but it sits too tall, it's too high, it's too heavy. A lot of number of things that I would change, but I'm not Hugo Eccles. So all that to say, I'm curious to hear whatever you can share in terms of the forward vision for that, because they just introduced a bike that was very still has that stout, muscular Harley feel, but in a much cooler way. The Harley Sportster S.
Yeah.
It's 100 pounds lighter than all their other bikes, at least, and it's a really interesting. And talk about torque and power, man. That bike has a lot of it. So anyway,
Yeah, that's a really interesting bike. I mean, I suppose technically Livewire's not Harley anymore, is it? Because they've kind of broken loose, and
right,
they're going to be doing a SPAC, aren't they? To
right,
raise
right.
funds and stuff like that, which is actually really exciting. I mean, it's going to be. I think they're going to be the first publicly traded EV company, I think, or
Hmm,
EV motorcycle company anyway.
okay,
Um, Yeah, but the Sportster is really cool. I actually got to test ride the kind of the smaller version, the Nightster.
okay,
Yeah, well, actually, I did some I did some riding for the campaign when the Nightster came out. The crew came up here to San Francisco, kind of Marin Headlands, and I rode the bike around with them. It was a photographic campaign,
yeah,
so actually, if you kind of
very cool.
squint, you see some of those photos. It's actually me. um, uh, but yeah, that was really cool. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by the Sportster S, I have to say. Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the giant 160 tire on the front as well.
I know,
But
right?
but apparently, actually, it handles fine.
Apparently has a bit of a peak toward the center, which is an interesting idea. And
Yeah.
I had a Triumph Bonneville SC for a
Mm,
while that I really tricked out and redid, and I put bulky knobby tires on it,
mm.
and it drove fine. I mean, it's not like you're going to go take it on the track. You're not never
Modern
going to take a
tires.
Sportster on the track,
Well, you never know. I mean,
but you could. The power is there. Woo!
they're taking the baggers on the track, which is really cool. I saw that a couple of
Yeah,
weeks ago.
yeah,
The king of the baggers stuff, which is actually,
right.
I'm just like, I couldn't be less interested in baggers, but it was
I know.
really compelling racing. I mean,
Yeah, right.
because you've literally got the kind of panniers are like scraping on the ground
I
as they're
know.
going over, and the thing is, they're so wide.
They're so
I mean,
wide. They're
they're
so
all
heavy.
lightened up. I mean, they're not as heavy as they look because they're all
Yeah.
A lot of it's empty.
Yeah.
But they were really cool. But yeah, the Sportster S is great. I really like the silhouette of it. And in fact, you mentioned, some issues you have with the Livewire one, I suppose, technically, because
Hmm.
they have a smaller one, the Del Mar, that they released. They did a limited edition on.
Right.
Yeah, what I'm working on is going to be lower and longer. We're actually we're attempting to remove the frame entirely.
Oh, wow.
And make a monocoque bodywork, so a structural monoshell bodywork that's going to support the swing arm and the headstock, which is
wow.
It's quite an undertaking. I mean, that's where the CAD comes in, because you can model it and then you can test it, which is really cool. And so you can put a number of forces through it and just see if it's strong enough or not, which is before you cut metal, which is really cool.
Sure.
And then I'm having to, it's similar in a way to the XP project with Zero. I'm having to rearrange some components to be able to create the silhouette we want. And so we're going to push increase the angle of the forks a little bit. So it's actually going to feel much more kind of Harley. I think it goes from something like 24 degrees to 27.
Interesting.
But we change the offset, so the trail is actually a little bit better. It goes from like 110 to 100 mil trail. So it should be pretty sharp. It's always quite difficult to tell. You have to build the things, really. But
yeah.
But as far as you can tell, kind of like on screen, it should be really cool. Yeah, so it's sort of a low, long electric bike. And again, similar sort of thinking, some similar thinking to the XP, but just trying to imagine what you can do with electric motorcycles, because you still need a kind of tank of sorts, because it's good to control with your knees.
Right.
But obviously that doesn't carry fuel or anything. And so it's like, well, short of just making a sort of decorative shell that doesn't do anything,
right,
maybe we can actually make it be structural. So taking some inspiration from Ducati Panigales, the V4Rs and all that kind of stuff, where those Panigales, they have no frame. The swing arm comes off the back of the engine block, and the airbox on top is, I think they used to be carbon, but I think they might be like magnesium now. They're cast magnesium, and they're structural. The airbox contains the headstock.
Yeah.
There's no frame. It's just motor, airbox, and headstock, swing arm. And so, and I think that's a real interesting opportunity with electric. There's some other companies like Damon out in Vancouver that they've got this thing called, I think it's called the Hyperdrive, which is, again, it's a similar thing. I mean, I think it's probably taking a page out of race bikes and Ducatis and stuff, where the powertrain is the structural element, so you don't have to add frames and stuff around it.
Yeah,
so you can save some weight.
They're going an interesting direction. The hyper fighter, I think it's called, or something like that.
Yeah, the naked one. Yeah,
the numbers on that over 200 miles an hour, almost 200 horsepower. Torque is just off the charts.
Yeah.
I mean, there have not been many designs that have gotten me really excited. That's a good looking bike.
It is a good looking bike, and they've been evolving it. I saw a newer one at the Peterson Museum opening, a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
The Custom Revolutionaries exhibition. That
yeah.
If people are interested in seeing the XP's in that exhibition, along with a number of other bikes, which are pretty cool.
Yeah.
I don't think the Hyper, I don't think the Damon is in there.
Yeah.
It was there for the opening, but then I think they're taking it away again. But yeah, it's developed. It's got, every time you see it, it's got a little bit lighter, a little bit slimmer. They're constantly engineering it down and down and down. I mean, I suppose it's it's still quite a traditional silhouette, with a kind of tank and everything. But so a lot of that it's just battery. It's got to be tall, and you kind of want it in the middle of the bike, and they tend to start sort of dictating what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that the battery, how you design around a battery is an interesting thing, and I'm sure you're wrestling with that every day. Because if you look at Curtis, for example, very different take on the battery. very
Mm.
cylindrical, almost like looks like a rocket booster,
Yeah.
and it's a very different configuration. The battery is submerged in fluids, et cetera, et cetera. So it'd be
Yeah.
interesting to see, for example, what Livewire can do, because that battery is just so tall.
Well, it's got the
Um,
motor underneath it as well. You know, they've got the
yeah.
motor underneath it and then the battery on top. So
Whereas
that's,
most
just
are,
stacks.
yeah,
Most are
yeah,
behind,
yeah,
and it's got a, I don't know what you call it, like a longitudinal motor, and then a
right,
gearbox that knocks the drive 90 degrees.
yeah,
Yeah, most are more like a short kind of cylinder that's sort of uses the same axis as the swing arm, like Zero does. But yeah, I guess, I mean, you can definitely feel it when you're riding the Zero versus the Livewire.
yes.
The Livewire's got, it feels like it's got lower center of gravity, which is quite nice actually. It feels more Harley, I suppose. Although technically they're not Harley anymore.
Does it really? See, I've not been on the Livewire. I haven't got on it
It's
simply
a
because, and I've ridden the
mm,
Zeros and done reviews on the Zeros, and was
mm,
surprisingly uh, enjoyed my ride much
yeah,
more than I expected, I should say.
mm,
I guess. But the Livewire, I looked at it 2 or 3 times, and
and
I
you're
was talking
like,
about doing some other reviews for them, and I'm like, I don't know, it's so tall, it's so heavy. I just sort of made the assumption
yeah.
it's not gonna have that low center of gravity, like you said.
Um, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little heavier than the Zero, but it's
Okay.
got it's got some other cooling systems and stuff on it.
Yeah.
I mean, the Zero is a very simple bike, and there
Yeah.
are pros and cons
Yes.
to not having cooling systems and stuff. They're
Yeah.
much simpler, but then it hits its limitations quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there are Energicas and stuff. But I remember, I mean, I'm more familiar.
Yeah.
The Zero, the XP is the same wet weight as a 998. It's like 280 kilos, I think 400 and something,
I don't know
480.
what all that Brit talk is.
I know.
Talk in pounds.
400 I think it's like
Yeah.
440 pounds or 480 pounds, 460 or
Is that
something.
right?
460, I think. 461, I think, from memory.
Okay.
So it's not terrible. I mean, you've got to really compare it to like a full wet weight to be fair.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, the live wire is really interesting to work on. And so that's quite exciting, trying to sort of push the boundaries. And
Yeah.
because I think the other thing is you want to, the challenge I have with designing electric is there's all of those things that we love in gas bikes that you lose if you're
Yeah.
not careful. The
Oh,
exhaust and the sort of all the lovely colors when the exhaust blues, and then you've got kind of mechanical stuff like
yeah.
carburetors and things, um and clutches moving around and stuff, and you lose all of that. And I think that's with the live wire, it's an attempt to inject some of that back in. So the live wire's got this 90-degree gearbox that comes off the motor, because the motor sort of drives longitudinally, and you have to
Okay.
get it to come across. And then it has a kind of 3 sprocket setup, which which I'm really kind of like highlighting. So it's where the belt goes over it, and it's got like a tensioning wheel and stuff like that.
Cool.
But that's really nice, and it's very kind of
Yeah.
Harley. It's not. It sort of reminds you a little bit of the kind of primary drive, secondary drive that like Harleys do.
Okay.
So that's kind of cool. So trying to keep some of
Yeah.
that stuff,
Yeah.
and then
The sensory and the visual is so important to this
yeah.
whole experience. If you lose
Well,
that, you're losing a whole lot.
yeah, and then a lot of the materiality. I think
Yeah.
if you're not too careful, it becomes very plasticky. So the monocoque is going to be this beautiful machined monoshell of machined aluminum, or aluminium, as we like to say.
Aluminium, right?
I like to. I used to joke with my clients that aluminium was just like aluminum, just a little bit shinier and a little bit more expensive,
That's right.
but it's worth it.
Right.
But just beautiful machined aluminium, lovely kind of machine paths, and then there's a seat that's cantilevered off the back that we're probably going to make out of carbon fiber. So we're really kind of getting some of that kind of materiality back it. You know what I mean? Some really
Yeah.
nice
So I've
stuff.
sent you a number of interesting designs lately.
Yeah.
Sent you a really super cool bike. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Uh,
the MV.
yeah, the MV. Who were they working with? Z Milanese, or they were doing
Oh,
this.
was that Zagato or was that someone else? It was
Yeah,
it
I'm
was
not
one of the coach building companies, wasn't it?
right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'd
yeah.
like to see it in reality. It looks a little tall, doesn't it?
It
And
does a little bit.
it's got a little bit of a sort of dolphin nose on it, a little bit.
Yeah, I love
But
the
in
lines though.
person, it might be nice.
I love
Yeah.
the curves, the fluidity from center mass on back.
Mm.
A lot of bike designs, you'll see something gorgeous at the front, and then it just kind of like tails off, and there's a big gap between the seat and the wheel, and it just looks
Mm.
unbalanced. What I liked about that one is the fluidity
Yeah.
of the lines.
You get that with cars a lot as well. They look
Yeah,
like kind of cut and shuts, right? Like they're obviously like one team did the front, and the other a
right,
different team did the back, and they never spoke
right.
to each other. And
Yeah,
you're like, how can those be the same car?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, no, there's some really interesting stuff. I mean, you sent me that, and I was wondering whether that's, there seems to be a bit of a trend for that, doesn't there? I mean, Aston
yes,
Martin are
yeah,
um, doing a motorcycle with Brough Superior.
yeah,
While back, Daniel Simon did one with Lotus that was powered by KTM. Um, I think it's quite. Oh, and then there's Arc, which is an electric motorcycle company out of Britain. Ex
Is
Jaguar designers, I think, which is pretty cool.
that right? Okay.
But I think the challenge is the cost, isn't it? It's try to keep the cost.
So
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
that brings us, that brings us to a question I wanted to chat about. So,
Mm,
we've touched on this before, but we haven't really dove all in. The question becomes, and so Triumph's there now, front and
yes.
center, working on EV.
Yeah.
Zero's already there, Energica, and so forth. But then you got this host of companies, right? You've
Mm,
got the super high end rolling sculpture approach of Curtis, then you've got the more speed bike, track bike-ish looking power focus of Damon, and there's a
mm,
slew of others that are in process or in production. But really,
mm,
when they say in production, it's put your deposit now, and the question for me is
mm,
how many of these companies actually make it to full scale production? And because right now we're in this sort of, I think, sort of a renaissance of bike design
mm.
because we have this new technology that's prompting new approaches. But if it's only two or three big companies who already have the production and the scale there, we may
Mm.
lose that. So, I'm hoping that's not
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. Well, like you said, Triumph's got their, what is it, the TE1 that
T1.
I
Yeah,
think they've got to a point, they're in like third phase or something, which is really interesting. And then Norton just announced that they were going to do an electric bike as well. I think that it sounds like Norton are working with some of the teams and suppliers that Triumph was as well. There's a bit of, it seems to be like a bit of overlap, but I
yeah,
think that might be a UK government grant thing. No, I think it's fascinating. I mean, I think they're all quite traditional looking though. I mean, to be honest, I find the technology kind of under the skin of the Triumph much more interesting looking than what they came up with, which looks like a speed triple.
yeah,
Which
yeah,
I was like, oh, really? After all
yeah,
that, it's a speed triple.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, similar with Damon's. It's really very well executed, Damon. But again, I like the bike, but I have to say, once they strip all the bodywork off, that hyperdrive's really interesting.
yeah.
And I think sometimes I think maybe that's what we need to start looking at is,
Mm.
there's just some of this sort of, engineering porn.
Forward-looking design.
Yeah, there's some really nice
Yeah.
stuff going on, but yeah, I mean, EV is so interesting. The electric's so interesting because especially with the bigger bikes, they can kind of be anything. And you think traditional gas bikes, they're really driven by, the whole characteristic and the brand is driven by the motor, right?
Right.
You know, the Harley V twin has a certain characteristic, a certain weight, a certain sort of performance that completely drives what that bike becomes.
Yeah.
Same with like with with Ducati, but Ducati L twins and now the V4s and stuff. But with electric, it's a blank slate in a way. It's quite, which is interesting opportunity and a real challenge simultaneously, because it's kind of like, well, I think we had this conversation before. I had a potential client for the XP who was talking to me about it, and he's like, I'm not actually, I love the way it looks. I think for him, and actually I've heard this from a number of customers, like they're not a huge fan of like Zero's in-house styling, but the XP for them is kind of like the best of both worlds. They're like, I get all this reliability from a big company like Zero or Livewire or Harley, but and I get to have my cake and eat it, because I get this sort of cutting edge design with it, but with all the reliability.
And rideability, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
Design can go so far that it's amazing, but it's not rideable. Maybe.
Oh yeah, no,
maybe
I'm
it's
not.
great
Yeah,
to look
I'm not.
at. It needs to be rideable, right?
Yeah, I'm not really that interested in that. But so I was talking to this this XP client and customer, and he was saying, I'm actually a little intimidated by like the sort of top end power. And I said, well, that's great, because you can literally make the bike act like a 125,
right,
until you feel comfortable, and then you can up it to a 250, and then you can become a 400, and then you can build it up to like a kind of the liter bike equivalent or bigger.
Right.
But it's all of those things, and so it's kind of like, which one do you pick? Because it could be any or none of them. So I think that's a real challenge. But yeah, I think the technology is really interesting. I think as it's getting a little bit more, especially as all the battery packs and stuff are becoming more structural, they're having to put more interesting stuff in. They're less sort of wheelie suitcase with
predictable,
with some like bodywork stuck on it. You know what I mean? Like sort of, because some of those early EV bikes look like PC towers, really.
Yeah.
Like they were not very appealing.
Suitcase with wheels and a handlebar.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And I can see why people would not, people get excited by the possibility, but I think if you just look at it sort of straight on, it's not great.
No, that's why they're all talking to you, Hugo, because your designs are so daggum compelling.
Well, we were talking, you mentioned this Renaissance thing, and I think I mentioned this before. Like, it just feels, I feel like we've got this real opportunity, like the kind of 1900s in motorcycling, where we've got this opportunity to reinvent stuff. And it's like, so why make it look like a gas bike? Like, because also it sort of doesn't make sense. Bits do, like the sort of knee pads on the tank are useful, and there's some stuff, little windscreens and things, but there's other stuff that we just don't need. And it's like, why keep that? There's other ways of kind of connecting those parts together.
Yeah.
That are kind of potentially really interesting. And the same with the live wire and the tank is like, let's make the tank structural, and then bolted onto the the battery box, because the battery case in the live wire is basically structural, because the frame attaches to it. So it's you could do it. It's just a bit more effort. But hopefully, and to be honest, I do these things. I don't really have any sense of whether it's going to be successful or not. But it's hopefully, there's this old Ettore Sottsass, Italian Memphis designer, has this lovely phrase that design is debate. I mean, it's intended as a kind of dialogue, right? Yeah. I'm like, and then I'm hoping other people go, yes, no, but, or yes, and then they build on it, or they respond to it, or and then we have this kind of back and forth, when then hopefully, everything just gets more and more interesting and exciting. And I mean, the new Livewire, the Delmar that they did, has more of a kind of structural battery and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. I think it's very similar to some of the architecture that Alta was experimenting with.
Okay. Well, the super exciting thing that has come out of this conversation today, I have to say, is that you're actually going to produce some bikes in numbers
Yeah,
because to me that's the real thing. So many cool designs out there, but for guys like you who are able to design and then put stuff out there after you tease
yeah.
everybody to death, that's uh
Well,
that's what's
yeah,
really going to ignite that future forward sort of
yeah. I
design
mean,
process.
if you can
It's
do more
great if
than,
two guys can own it, but hey, what about
yeah.
the others,
Well,
So
I mean, that's a nice thing. Yeah.
mhm.
I mean, so we're gonna, under the skin, it's got this, it's very similar to the stock bike. Apart from it's got this technology that boosts power by like 20%. So it's not entirely similar. But the reliability is. But then you've got this
Yeah,
cutting edge design. And yeah, it's great because also, there's so much time and effort to design a bike, and then you just build one is always quite wasteful.
yeah,
So to be able to like build, well, we're going to build maybe 2 dozen of them or something like that.
yeah.
And then that actually is really cool because it opens up other opportunities, because then we can do the tooling, and then we can do some really nice materials like carbon fiber, hand laid carbon fiber and stuff like that.
Right.
You
You
know,
just had the bike show up in the movie, right?
yes, yeah, yeah. In it's the XP was in a Paramount movie with Owen Wilson in it. It's called Secret Headquarters. It's these kids discover their dad's a superhero, and one of
Yeah.
the vehicles he has in his sort of superhero cave is
Yeah.
the XP. So
Nice.
that's really exciting. And then they also very kindly put it in the trailer. So you know, lots of people are going to see the trailer, and
Yeah.
less people are going to see the full film. So, but
Very cool.
yeah, that's really cool.
So what's Hugo designing in 5 years, 10 years, if he had his druthers? Do you look that far out or no?
To a certain extent, I think you try to keep it relatively organic, because I think there's sometimes you can be so fixated on a distant target that you miss the thing that's right here, right now. So it's a balance between the two. I'm I'm sure we'll be doing more electric. I mean, because California's just announced by 2035 you won't be able to sell any more gas vehicles, and that's only.
Better work on that grid.
I know. Well, there is that. Well, that's
I'm
someone else. That's
not
someone
sure
else's
there's a lot
problem.
of rationality there, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, but
Yeah,
that's only
yeah,
13 years away,
yeah,
12 and a half years away. It's not very
yeah,
long. Um, which it's not huge in development cycles and stuff like
yeah.
that.
No, it's
But I think it's really
yeah,
interesting. Yeah. So there's that, and then yeah, we're just constantly talking to people and trying to get opportunities. Oh, actually, yeah, we're going to be doing. I don't know how much I can say about it.
well, not
Might
again,
be doing. Might be
not
doing. I
again.
know. Sorry. We're working on an electric version of the Hyper for the Hyper Scrambler, which was
Oh,
the
now we're
Ducati
talking.
bike that was on
Now we're
Jay
talking. Yeah.
Leno's. We're
Oh,
going to build a couple of those for
okay.
like a really cool. We're going to be doing some very cool stunts with
Okay. Yeah.
them. But we had to
We're
build
gonna
more than one because we might
we're gonna
destroy
need
one
to
or
do
two.
some more podcasts and film sessions and
Yeah.
those builds.
Yes.
That could be a lot of fun to chronicle
Yeah.
those builds. Because those are two sexy bikes, I have to say.
I mean, the Hyper's always kind of looked a bit electric to me anyway, because it doesn't
Yeah,
have, it has a box exhaust, so
yeah.
which sort of blends with the belly pan.
It's
So
got beautiful bits and pieces on that engine, as you
mm,
say, but yeah, I can see where that would really work.
it could be really fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
So there's lots of things you can do with electric that you can't do with gas bikes.
cool. All right, well, let's leave them there, wanting for more. It's always fascinating. I always
Yeah.
feel like we're just scratching the surface after we've talked for however long we talk. It doesn't
Too
matter.
short as usual. Yeah.
So yeah, and I hope to get out that way soon and
Mm.
come see your stuff firsthand, put eyes on it. I'm going to Barber Motorsports this weekend and
Oh,
doing some stuff there, and the races are there. Moto America
yeah.
Superbike is there this weekend.
Well, they're
So,
working on that really interesting Ducati mono with Pierre Terblanche as well, aren't they? They've got
yeah,
that prototype down in the design studio. That'd be really interesting. I love the
yeah.
Barber Museum. I mean, it's got
Uh,
so much to see.
they call it the Augusta National of the autosport world. Do you know it
Mm.
has like 42 or 43 sculptures on the property?
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's
I
like
couldn't.
an outdoor uh art portfolio all over the grounds. And of course, the museum is the largest motorcycle museum in the world.
I know, and that's just a fraction of what they have. The rest, all of,
Yeah,
I think like
yeah,
another sort of the other kind of three-quarters of that are in storage somewhere or being renovated.
it's
Or I mean,
amazing.
that's yeah, I
Yeah,
know, absolutely incredible.
yeah, amazing. So a lot of cool stuff coming on that front too.
Yeah.
So let's keep in touch. Thank you,
Yes.
Sir Hugo Eccles, Design Royalty, and untitledmotorcycle.com. What's the website?
Yeah. Untitledmotorcycles.com. Yeah.
Untitledmotorcycles.com. You will see a host of very unique design platforms, and they're all amazing. So looking forward to the builds. Let's keep in touch, my friend.
Great. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Take
Okay.
care.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.